And we're live. Welcome to Substrate Seminar. Hey, Alex. Hey, Vlad. Super happy to have you guys with us today. Alex and I have been talking about having a session for a couple of months now, and it kind of came together, and I'm super happy it did. So my name is Sasha Lansky. I'm developer advocate at Parity Technologies. So these sessions, for those of you who are new, are geared to just learning together about Substrate. And today we're really lucky to have a team that's been working with Substrate and Frame for quite some time now. I think you guys were one of the first teams really developing with Frame. Is that correct, Alex?
Yeah, we started working with Frame in 2019 and had solved tons of issues while seeing this evolution of Substrate API, like version 1, 2, 3, and so on.
Yeah, that's super cool. I noticed that there was a Substrate seminar that you guys did just over a year ago. I think it was June 2020, and you guys went over your pallets and your application logic and all that stuff. And so I'm really excited, having looked at that recently, to see like what's evolved, what you guys have been working on since, and stuff that's been changing also in your runtime. So I hope we can like look at that stuff later on. But yeah, without further ado, this session is geared towards us also as an audience. I'm going to be an audience too, asking questions. Hopefully we can interrupt if there's any like things that are unclear. And we have Vlad here today also, who's going to be helping. Vlad, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Vlad, and I'm a core Substrate developer at Subsocial. 60-70% of stuff made in our runtime, and a Substrate node is like what I'm doing. I do partly DevOps in our team, and some other stuff related to dev experience and things.
Cool. Well, I'm excited to hear your view and your presentation on the stuff that you guys have been working on. Just a quick thing before we do start. When Alex and I were talking about this session, we were kind of talking about the fact, and I kind of brought up this notion that I've come across, which is that a lot of developers building with Substrate and in blockchain world, generally speaking, have a tendency to maybe focus more on decentralized finance or applications that are very feel very close and easy to sort of pursue, that are in this immediate realm of the possibilities with building with blockchain infrastructure. And when I was talking with Alex, we were talking about how building with using Frame and building with Substrate really kind of changes that status quo in a way, right? And where we're really thinking about pushing the limits of what we can do with our tools that perhaps are not available in other with other technologies. So that's kind of like where I'm coming from when I say I'm excited about this. I'm really excited in kind of learning about how you approached building with Frame in this context. So without further ado, I'll leave you guys to it, and I'll put my video down. If there's anything I can jump in for, let me know, and I'll be in the back. Sounds good?
Yeah. So can I share my screen?
Yeah.
Let me try. Second. Okay. Do you see my screen now?
I can see your screen. Yeah, perfect.
Great. So, yeah, today's presentation is a little bit based on our previous presentations because we continue the things that we started, and so this will be first part will be a recap of what is going on our end and what we have. So maybe some people already knew some stuff. So yeah, let me start. I started to work with blockchain space in 2017 with the craze of ICOs, and I started to work with obviously Solidity, smart contracts, and it was amazing time. trying to deploy smart contracts on testnet, on mainnet, and seeing that it works actually. So it was cool at the time. And then like several months later, it was obvious that smart contracts are not an ideal tool for if you want to create some more complex things than just token sales, token exchange, and some something similar like doing something with tokens. So if you want to build something like decentralized alternatives of Twitter, Airbnb, or even like Amazon, maybe even at least smaller, simpler version, but still, you need something more feature rich and something that can be upgradable, and you can iterate in a similar way how people usually do in startups. So you don't in startups you don't need to, and you cannot think about everything in advance. Like you cannot imagine what all the possible features will be on Airbnb. So they just launch with something, they just look at feedback from people, and then just based on that feedback, as they iterate and they improved, upgraded what they have, and so on and so forth. But like with Bitcoin and even with Ethereum, people needed to imagine in advance, like what are the possible features that people may use should be, and that's why people made like Buterin and they made a conclusion of what are inefficiencies of Bitcoin, and then they solved these inefficiencies with like smart contracts and EVM machine and all this stuff. So they solved what they saw on Bitcoin, but then after Ethereum was launched, and a few years later, they saw inefficiencies of Ethereum, and then to overcome these inefficiencies, Gavin teams started to think like on Polkadot and all this stuff. And from like my understanding, they came to a conclusion that we need to design something more flexible, so that we don't need to start another project just to fix inefficiencies of previous project. And this is how I see and feel Substrate. So this is a framework that allows you to iterate in a startup way. So you don't need to design and implement everything perfect from and all the features should not be and don't need to be implemented on the first day, on the first block of your mainnet, for example. So you can start with smaller range of features and then improve it later. So this is how I found Substrate helpful and flexible. So in 2019, I thought like, looks like with Substrate we can try to build alternative to a protocol on top of which people would be able to create something like Twitter or Medium or Reddit. And this is how Subsocial appeared. So yeah, and Subsocial is an open protocol for social networking with built-in finance. It's built on Substrate and Ipfs. And in 2018, we applied for a grant from the Foundation and implemented the first features for it. It included spaces, posts, comments, votes, follows, and so on. So this is core elements of Subsocial that allows you to have your blog or forum or something like subreddit, and then you can post the status, article, video, any type of media piece of content. Then others can follow your space, or you can follow other spaces. Then people can comment on posts and upload and download them and share to other spaces. So basically, you could replicate functionality similar to good old Twitter or Medium with Subsocial. And such as this is an open API, so of course you could extend it with features you need or remove them from your web app, because with Subsocial, such as an open protocol, people can build alternative user interfaces on top of it. Yeah, actually, let me share a link to presentation. 1 second. Yeah, so this is a link to presentation. So Subsocial, currently we have launched BetaNet last year, and it works right now on Substrate version 2, but we already prepared changes for Substrate version 3, and we are about to launch mainnet. I hope this next month, and it should be on Substrate version 2. In our case, content of posts, profiles, spaces like titles, description, tags. It's we keep this in JSON file, store on Ipfs, the same as images. And also interesting feature is that on Subsocial there is no email password authentication, but rather we use solely sign in with Polkadot extension. So any account that you have on any Substrate-based chains like Polkadot, Kusama, Karura, Moonriver, Shiden, etc., even testnets, you can use this account to sign into Subsocial. Then the next thing that you need to get some tokens, and this is where problems came for normal users, for people that are not from crypto, or even from crypto, but yeah, they need to get tokens of your blockchain. So we will get to this later in fill as transaction section of this presentation. Yeah, so at Subsocial, there is a saying like, not your keys, not your data. On Subsocial, this is totally opposite. Your keys, your data, your content. All right, so such as we don't use this email password, everything is signed and sent to blockchain, and content is saved on Ipfs and CDS on blockchain, and everything works perfectly well. So besides that, we also have some features that are not possible to implement on blockchain in an efficient way, such as personalized notifications, full text search over the content, and search engine optimization with server-side rendering. And we solve these things by indexing data in a database like Postgres, for example, or for notifications or Elasticsearch or full text search. Actually, you can search in Postgres as well. So it's up to architect of your application to decide where to do full text search or the content. And for search engine optimization, we do server-side rendering. So when, for example, Googlebot goes to Subsocial pages, we render content on server side, so Google can see it. Yeah, some people may say that Google can index JavaScript implemented code, and looks like it can, but sometimes it works strange. So yeah, we have this server-side rendering thing. Yeah, so this is how content look like for Googlebot. So it has this meta tags like title, image, description, and we have this for Open Graph from Facebook and Twitter for Twitter API. So this gives us nice looking previews of post, like with image, title, description, and so on. So besides that, I mentioned that we have WebDApp. So WebDApp is implemented in Rust, in React plus Redux, and we use some Ant design components and building this on Next.js framework. So that with Next.js we can have server-side rendering and routing for your pages. But also we are building developing Flutter Sdk Flutter is a cross-platform mobile development framework from Google, and in Flutter you program in Dart language. It's a Java similar language. So we created the first version of Flutter Sdk, and with that first version of it, you can read data from our Substrate-based chain, Subsocial chain. Such data is posts, spaces, a number of upvotes, followers, and yeah, so some other stuff. In the second current versions that we're working on, we added more read functionality, like read profiles and read list of followers and upvoters. And also we will add support for mention of current account, so that you can sign in to the application on mobile. And yeah, of course, sign in and send in transactions. So this will be in the next Flutter SDK version. So yeah, this is how our web app looks for mobile, and such as on mobile phones, browsers doesn't support extensions. So you can use our web app only in read mode, and this is very frustrating. That's why we're building Flutter mobile app on Flutter, and it will be able to assign transactions in the future versions. So this is a link to our Flutter SDK. And I'm not the best expert in the underneath, what's happening underneath in this in our Flutter SDK, but I know that it uses foreign function interface, and it works with subxt. This is a Rust library that knows how to read and send data from your Substrate chain. So that it means that our Flutter SDK works very efficiently and quite fast. Yeah, so I mentioned that we implemented.
Alex, I'm just gonna pause there. I think it's a good place to just take a breather. First of all, I'm going to share the link to the Flutter SDK thing. I think that's super interesting because essentially you're creating an API to directly connect with Flutter, which is who's developing Flutter again? I think it's Google, right?
Yes. Google develops Flutter Framework,
so
and
that, by the way, is a super neat and it's pretty modern, right? Framework for mobile
from my
applications.
experience, why people choose on Flutter, even if there is this strange language Dart, because as for me, it looks more like end-to-end tool. Like from A to Z, it has everything. Like in contrast to React Native, you need to assemble the whole the whole thing, like something you get from here, from there, this library, that library. Then you need to make them friends, and then you need to worry about some inefficiencies. But like with Flutter, yeah, it looks like it's more polished and complete solution. Yeah, but
so I'm curious, like how are you really building out that sort of? I mean, the way I think about it is kind of like a Polkadot.js apps API, where you're connecting your front-end functionality in JavaScript with the Substrate node. How does it work with Flutter, and how did you build that part?
Okay, I'm not the best expert here. I just can open code and look on this. If you want. Let's see. Okay, so this is Flutter SDK, and I think it should be lib, and then like here, Subsocial SDK Dart, and it has this thing like instance, so it creates a connection to our Substrate over here. Yeah, and you can see that it uses this FFI thing and protobuf and some generated stuff like for types. I think. Yeah, then it's create in connection similar to like Polkadot.js does Like
Right.
you pass an endpoint here. Then once you have this connection, you have this getters. Currently, we have just getters. I think let's highlight this.
Yeah, I mean, structurally very similar, right, to really what we have in the developer hub, the front end node template in React, except that here we're building mobile applications using this SDK. So I guess like I just wanted to highlight that because that's pretty neat. You know, you guys already built that out, and it could be an inspiration for other teams and individuals.
Yeah, from what I know, Polka Wallet started as React Native, and then sometime after they migrated to Flutter Framework, and yeah, now they're developing in Flutter, and I know that I think in CoEnter they also forked Polka Wallet in Flutter, and they continue with this.
Cool.
But Flutter Wallet, they decided to implement native applications for each platform, and but in our case, I think like it's too much because too many languages, too many people needed if you want to cover every platform independently. But I don't know. I think like Flutter could be quite a good compromise here.
Mm-hmm.
And so far, so good. It works, and I remember we explored what Polka Wallet does in getting and sending data to and from Substrate, and they did something really crazy stuff. Like they had this web view. In this web view, they triggered creation of JavaScript stuff like connection to Polka.js through Polka.js to Substrate, and getting data, then converting this data in some way, and notifying Flutter, and then reading this. Like it was very, very inefficient for me. And one thing is that I will come to this later, that conversion of bytes from Substrate to JavaScript objects is quite slow on my experience. And for example, in our case, we don't do this conversion through JavaScript, but we get data from using this FFI, and this is way more fast on my experience.
Cool. Makes sense. Thanks for sharing that. So without getting too off track, and I hope I'm not throwing you off, but there's a couple questions that I think we can just get out of the way. So Tomas is asking, what tips? So the first question at the top is saying, I start to build a Substrate. Could you give me some advice on what you learned that could be helpful at the beginning of an implementation? So I think what is meant by this is that at the beginning, what are the pain points and what are some tips for people to get started?
Do you see my screen, by the way?
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Yeah, for Substrate, I would say you definitely need to go to Substrate dev, and there's good things like recipes were very helpful, and this is how to guides new stuff.
Yeah, Alex is doing my job for me right now. Thank you.
Nice.
Yeah,
also,
I mean,
like check out tutorials over here. Also, what is helpful? Yeah, check out like past seminars. You can find them on Crowdcast and on YouTube. And at least in our case, what was very helpful is coupling of pallets. Where is it? Yeah, we have this in presentation actually.
Yeah,
this one. This link is very helpful. At least if you are going to create many different pallets, and then you don't want to create one huge pallet having everything all together, you need to think about how you're going to organize your pallets and how you're going to connect them.
Yeah, so I think you're gonna talk about that a little later. Like I said, I didn't want to get too distracted here. By the way, I'll share these links as Alex continues. But I mean, I think that's definitely like the right resources to get started. I'm not sure that entirely answered your question, Tomas, but let's just close that one. And if you have anything,
yeah,
else
also join Substrate chat if you're not. So yeah.
Yeah, so for sure. I'll send all of those links. Let's just.
I would say read tutorials, write code, and chat. Read, write, chat. 3 words.
Write and chat, and then repeat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes cry. because of macroses on Rust.
Which are, by the way, only getting better. The dev experience is only getting better. There's actually a great seminar that we did last time about that, actually, so you should check that out if you haven't already.
Okay.
So there's a question about IPFS and how you use that, and I think you're going to get into the details, so we'll leave that question for now.
I think no, I didn't.
Do you want to answer that now?
Okay, so with IPFS, we do it quite simple. So we just host IPFS node on our end, and this IPFS node is open for read, so anyone can synchronize with it. And we didn't implement any incentivization for node operators to run IPFS because we thought it's not our job, and there are other projects that are doing this, like from Filecoin to Crust in Substrate ecosystem. And in the future, we are planning to integrate with these projects. But right now, we just add. So whenever you create a post, upload image, write text, we just add this and pin on our IPFS node. It returns CID, content ID of that added pinned JSON or image, and then we just initiate transaction. User signs transactions, and transaction includes data, among other stuff, SCID, and then we write the CID on a blockchain. So then when you display data on web app or mobile app, you read data from Substrate, like post details, and actually I can show it.
And then just to follow up, Alex, like the question that this person is asking here is, how does Subsocial benefit from that? I think that's more of a high level sort of like implementation decision, like why are you using IPFS for your use case? I think it's an interesting question.
How Subsocial benefit of what exactly?
From using IPFS to host its content.
Yeah, okay, so this goes to benefits of IPFS in general, I would say. And important thing here is that in IPFS, IDs of content are based on the content itself. So this is content addressable. I don't remember the full phrase here. It's something like content addressable approach in contrast to name addressable approach, like with URLs. Because with URLs, what is the problem is that today by this URL you can have this content. Tomorrow there could be like inappropriate images or something worse. But with IPFS, if you have this CID and you saw that behind this CID something like expected text like hello world, and then 100 years later, if you see and use the same CID, you will be sure that there will be the same text. And even if text is forgotten, lost, or image, but you keep CID, and like 1,000 years later, somebody appear and show you an image, you can easily prove that this image is the image that CID you have. So, for example, there could be interesting characteristics when somebody says something, and then that content was replicated on different servers across the world, and then some other governments put them down, some servers, and some server just was shut down by person before government get to them. But then, like when government was fallen, like 10 years later, people can show this content, start up the IPFS node, and in this way they can prove that this is the same content that it was there, because CID is like you can distance out of the box by using blockchain and IPFS. And plus, what is interesting, you can in our case, you can try to put web app in IPFS, I mean, static files like HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and the only thing that they need to operate as social networking is a connection to Substrate. Yeah, I think we need to do some to disable some features that are working with like Postgres and GraphQL, but in overall, you will have the common functionality that allows you to see spaces, and then you can go to space and see the content there. So all of this can work with just IPFS and Substrate. So you don't need an off-chain server with Postgres or something like that. But then search will not work and notifications will not work, because for these things, for search and for notifications, we use GraphQL.
Cool. That definitely answers, I think, a few questions here. And if there's any more questions about IPFS, like, feel free to use the question box.
Yeah, of course, it could be another storages could be used, and we put this into our design of our posts and spaces palette. So we use, I can show this in code. So for example, this is post and posts palette, and there is a structure post, pub struct post. And here we have such thing as content, and content is a structure. Wait, enum, I think it's enum. Yeah, so content is enum, and currently we support this IPFS, and it contains a vector of bytes to CID. So you can put CID of version 0 or 1, but potentially it could support different types of links to content. For example, you could put content directly on Substrate if you need. You can add other things like, I don't know, like private database, and maybe it will be like an array of couple of some things, like for example, database name, table name, and row ID. So in this way, you can refer to some private database, and people will see what the database name and table, but they will not see what is the content behind that. So this could be one of the approaches. Or it could be any string, again, that contains, I mean, from high level, like up, and then table name, and then colon this, and then you maybe encode with your encryption key and so on. So different approaches can be used for this, but the main thing is that you just need to store it on blockchain, and then your app can understand how to decode this stuff.
Cool. Thanks for showing that. I think you can kind of keep going with your flow, unless there's still a few other questions. I kind of marked all the IPFS questions as answered.
Okay.
I'm hoping that those that still have questions just re-ask them. I do want to let Alex get back to his presentation. There's just one question that is still a little high level, and we may as well just answer it before we move on, which is from Thomas again. So from a very high level, like a marketing perspective, what strategy did you use to convince people to use Subsocial?
Yeah, so this is not easy one because so far we haven't added monetization features, and looks like in blockchain people care more about tokens because they can make money with tokens, and like Axie Infinity is a great example of that, like game to earn, play to earn. So they can breed that creatures and then trade them, and they make money, and they buy houses on Philippines. So yeah, this is still things that we need to work more on this. Like monetization, and for this, we're planning to use like social tokens, NFTs, and tips, recurring subscriptions. So lots of cool stuff could be built because of Substrate flexibility, and plus, if connected with smart contracts, you can give to your community to show their creativity and creating smart contracts that can add additional monetizations. Yeah, but at some point you can look on Twitter, and it looks like people looking for a decentralized alternative to Twitter, but then the answer is not such simple as you may think. Like, for example, in our case, we have working blockchain in beta.net mode, we have working web app, and it's relatively usable. I mean, like, just look at how fast it loads your feed, and this is with sharing my screen and some load on CPU. You can switch between different tabs. I mean, it works like it just works. And this is working from blockchain, and this is in web app, and this is connected with Polkadot extension. And we still have problems with onboarding people, because we have created faucet so that people can go and enter the email address, and once verified email address, we drop them a very small number of tokens, like super small. By having 100 million of tokens, we drop them 0.5 tokens, but that was enough to have like about 20 transactions. And then some badass guy, he just generated hundreds of emails and started to getting tokens from our facet. So we decided to stop this, and now we're working on a free transaction thing. Yeah, so this is like challenges of mass adoption of blockchain. And yeah, people, like, from one point they want something decentralized, but they want the same level of user experience like they have with Twitter. They want to have web app, they want to have mobile app, they don't want to install yet another extension. Especially everyone looks like hate Polkadot.js because it doesn't look like MetaMask. You cannot see balances and all this stuff. And then they want to have it decentralized, but they don't want to bother about buying yet another tokens or solving this issue. So lots of issues over here. Yeah, and plus, if you add monetization, of course, it becomes much more interesting. So yeah, that's why we're building mobile app that will not require people to install Polkadot extension. Also, that's why we're building, working on feeless transactions, and Vlad will go through them later on this seminar. So we hope that this will improve user experience. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'll get back off camera and intervene if there's any questions that are relevant.
Okay. Yeah, so on this slide, I wanted to show that some demo of what we have, and I already clicked some pages. So on Subsocial, you can have such thing as spaces. This is like your personal blog or group, public group, like on Reddit, you have subreddits. So you can see a list of spaces. You can follow and follow them. Like, for example, you can, let's click here, this one. And you just click on follow, it sends transaction, and in a few seconds it should be complete. Okay, now you're not following this stuff. And also you can see who are the other followers over here. Okay, and then you can go to this space. You can see posts. So this, some people think that what we have here, this is like the final thing. This is what is Subsocial, but actually, in the first place, it makes sense to understand that Subsocial is a protocol, and you can build your own UI. It could be totally similar to Twitter if you want. It could be UI from CLI. it could be Flutter, anything. You can change it, whatever you need. You can create alternative stuff. And some people think like we building sort of like decentralized medium, but again, this is wrong, because you can build something similar to Instagram, where only images are displayed. And for example, if post doesn't have image, maybe on your user interface on your web app, you can show just posts that have images, and that's it. Or maybe you want to show only those posts that have less than 280 characters, like on Twitter. So this is totally possible, and this is just one of the iteration of how it could be looking. And in our case, we have this web app. Yeah, so you can go through spaces, you can read posts in that space. Quite a familiar user experience. And yeah, you can have comments as well and answer to them, like here. In every post, comment, follow, it's currently it's transaction. We have some plans to implement off-chain posting of information, so that it will be free for people. And then users could decide on whether they want to send through on-chain or off-chain, depending on at what level of security of the data they want to have. But you need to keep in mind that if you want some of your monetization methods to be based on some data, like when this post was posted, how many likes it has, how many comments, what comments from what authors, and so on and so forth, then you should have this information on chain, because otherwise it will be hard to, for a blockchain to decide on the monetization outcome. So in this case, we have upvotes and comments on chain, and in some cases it makes sense, in some not. And that's why we're thinking about several approaches to how data are posted and organized as on a platform, if you consider Subsocial as platform. Also, interesting feature is that you can add editors. So for example, you are owner of a space, but you want to allow other people to post there, and you can enable editors roles and add editor by account. So for example, if you go into edit editors, you can add some account over here. See. This one. Yeah, you can add another editors or remove existing one in this way. Yeah, I will just cancel this right now. And yeah, so this is a basic overview of what we have.
So Alex, I just shared a link of the permissions palette that you guys built. And I think it's very pertinent for what you're showing right now, because yes, we're looking at a very neat and slick user interface. I think you guys did a great job. But really what's happening behind the scenes of adding and removing editor capabilities is like, I would say, like a very core concept of using Frame. This is the concept of origins, where certain origins have different capabilities and different they can be authorized to perform different transactions. Is that correct, Alex? Do you want to speak a bit on how that is working behind the scenes?
Yeah, so that presentation that I had at last Substrate seminar last year, it was about permissions and roles and the loose and tight coupling of pallets, and there are a lot of details. But at the time we implemented the first version on Substrate, but we added support on web app, I think like half a year later, because we wanted to implement this in a very smooth way, like it is right now. And for example, we also used some other tricks here to make it working very smooth. For example, you can click on your account and see how many roles you have. So this shows that you have 2 roles in 2 spaces, like for example, on Subsocial FAQ and on Sandbox. And for this, we use even more stuff like Rpcs. So we created RPC, and we'll get back to them. We'll get to them later in this presentation. So with RPC, you can request such things like on the end of Substrate, you can get a list of roles by space, and then iterate over those roles and see what are accounts in those roles, and then look at if you are one of these accounts, and then if yes, then that RPC returns you list of spaces where you have a role. So this is it works very smooth, but underneath happening lots of interesting stuff right here. And the same about enabling roles and add editors. So for example, if you go to other space like Bill Loboon space, you cannot add editors because you're not owner of this. But if you go to some other space like this one, I own the space, you can see that there is a feature like enable editor. So first you click and then you need to sign transaction. It will enable support for editors, and then once enabled, you will see the same option like here, so that you can edit editors and then you can add account. Yeah, but I think we will not be able to cover all these details because
No, yeah. I'll let you continue. Super interesting stuff though.
Yeah, also it's interesting to mention that recently we launched such thing like Polka.com, and this currently it looks very similar to Subsocial. The only thing different is this black background from the first glance, but overall all other functionality is super similar unless you know where to look. And for example, if you go to, let's say, remark, and if you see Bruno here, you can see that he has this bird, and on Subsocial there is no such bird. Let's see. Okay, and you see that there is no such thing for Bruno, just name, address, balance, and so on. But on Polkaverse, we connect to Substrate. Additionally to connection to Subsocial, we show this Kusama bird if you have on-chain account on Kusama like this with information. This is the same information as you can see on polka.apps for Bruno account, and plus if you go to his account, yeah, you can see a merge of information, like he is a counselor on Kusama, he has this identity, and he has this information. And what's interesting, if you push on, for example, that should be Sean Tabrizi, and you can see that he has this green bird with green circle, and means that it's his identity is verified. Yeah, and also you can check, for example, validators. Let's see. We show also labels for validators, and if you switch to Kusama, and yeah, why it's so slow? And if you go to staking, wait for validators. Let's wait for some information. Okay, let's say this guy. Let's copy his account address, and then if you paste it here, yeah, you see that this guy is a validator and has verified identity as well. Yeah, and also what is interesting is that it also shows this information in comments. So for example, let's say there should be some comments like here. No, not enough. I don't know. Anyways, you can go to account and see comments of Bruno, and then you can go to post. And then it shows, yeah, so in comments, it shows who's post author, and again, this bird. So you can easily see that this guy has some information on Kusama. So we're planning to add support for Polkadot as well in similar way. And also we implemented functionality similar to Polka assembly, where you can create Kusama treasury proposal description, and it will be an alternative type of post on Subsocial, so where you could insert or select Kusama treasury proposal ID and then write a post in a standard way like you can do on Subsocial right now. But then it will be a post that is a description of Kusama treasury proposal. And what will be interesting stuff is that there could be different multiple Kusama treasury proposals even per one particular Kusama treasury proposal. So it means that anyone can start an alternative discussion thread of any Kusama treasury proposals, including past and current proposals. So yeah, with Polkaverse, yeah, another thing that I forgot to mention is that on Polkaverse we show a subset of what is happening on the whole Subsocial. And in particular, we show just spaces of projects related to Polkadot, Kusama ecosystems, and currently we show like something around 300 such projects. You can see them in a suggested list. Some of them already verified their ownership through official Twitter, and yeah, they started posting, like for example, Zeitgeist. Yeah. Yeah, and with Polkaverse, we're showing that you can have a subset of information from Subsocial running on your alternative web address, and you can change interface whatever you want. You can add additional functionality like we showed with this on-chain identity. You can remove any functionality. For example, you may want to hide a download button, for example. Everything is possible. Yeah, so this was a demo, and this is another slide on Kusama identity palette integration on Polkaverse. So currently in progress, as I mentioned before, is a mobile app development on Flutter. Also, we are finishing work with Philos transactions, and Vlad will get to it later. And yeah, in plans to add support for different monetization models based on social tokens, NFTs, tips. And for that, we are considering a couple of pallets from parity-like assets and uniques for tokens and NFTs, or their alternative pallets from ORML project from Akala. They use on Karura and Akala, like for tokens and for NFTs. And what is interesting about using tokens palette from ORML is that there is already DEX for these tokens on Karura. I'm not sure about what is happening in regard to DEX for assets palette from Parity. I don't know, but this is some information in terms of pros and cons. Yeah, so as I mentioned on Subsocial, we can have different types of posts, and what is interesting here is that you can have different types of posts inside of Substrate if you need to react to that different types inside of your blockchain. So for example, in our case, we implemented different types of posts through this field called extension, like post extension. And currently we support 3 types of posts, like regular post, like normal post, and then comment. Comment is a post that has a parent ID, like here, and shared posts. It is a post that is sharing another post, original post. And for example, if you want to implement poll with different options where people need to vote on some event or I don't know, another question, and if you want to make some changes in blockchain based on the voting, then definitely you need to implement a poll, a type of post inside of blockchain. But for example, if you want to create alternative, more UI specific things like status and article, like what is the difference between status on Twitter and article on Medium? Is that on Twitter you have this limitation of 280 characters, And on Medium, I don't know what the limitations, but articles can be like huge and lots of media embedded inside. But from blockchain perspective, it doesn't make a huge difference because it's just some content on in storage, like on IPFS in our case. Yeah, and also we're working on better editors that allow us to embedding of YouTube videos and tweets. Yeah, so about tech stack, I don't know if it's relevant here. It's more like Substrate Seminar, but we also use some databases like PostgreSQL and Elasticsearch for personalized notifications for users. When you subscribe to Spaces and Space has some new posts or somebody reacted to your comment is uploaded or answered to your post. So we index this by subscribing to events, Substrate events, and index them in Postgres. And for this, we have a separate slide about GraphQL. Slide number is 36. Also, we use Next.js for server-side rendering. It's helpful for SEO, and some UI library. So for better usage and deployment, we use Docker, and Vlad is the guy that worked on this. I don't think that we need to spend much time on this. So just there is a link you can follow and check out if it works for you. Okay, what's next? About source code, from the links that you shared before, you can see that most of our source code is open sourced, and you can find it at GitHub/Dubforce. And yeah, about Substrate and how we organized our pallets. So far we implemented several. I call them social pallets because they're related to social networking, and includes spaces. It's, as I mentioned, like personal blog or a group, posts, roles and permissions, and then additional stuff for spaces like to follow spaces, editing history of space and ownership, and then editing history for posts. And also important thing is profiles, because for example, if you go to Twitter, on Twitter, a page is called like account, right? But in blockchain, this word is already in use, and it means like you're something that is related to balance on blockchain. So we have this thing like profiles, and in our case, profiles is a structure that is one-to-one relation with an account, and it's optional. You can find a special palette here, and yeah, we call it like social account. Social account can have followers and optional link to profile, and profile can have a link to CID, content ID on IPFS that has like name and avatar and about. Yeah. So for this, to make them work together seamlessly, we use approach with tightly and loosely coupled pallets. And for this, we had a seminar last year. I think not so many things changed since that time, because it worked and it continued working. Also, I would like to mention that in Substrate, we do this approach of sort of CRUD. I mean, we start because there is no such clear way to delete everything completely from history and blockchain. So, but we use this like create, read, update approach, where we have usually structure with ID, and there is owner, and then some content and field hidden. So with hidden, you can mark any entity that it's supposed not to be shown on UIs that respect this rules. So yeah, so for post and spaces and roles, we usually have similar fields with some additional, of course. And then we usually use approach with in storage where we have maps of something parent ID to children IDs. Like for example, in this case, this is a storage space IDs by owner. like if you go to Subsocial and you can see like my spaces, you can see what spaces this current account owns, like Subsocial highlights, and some other stuff. And if you switch to another account, like Alice, for example, you can go to my spaces as well, and you see that this is another space, and one of them is hidden. Okay, and yeah, it means that we have storages per each account that is a map, and it points to a list of space IDs that this account currently owns. And for example, we have the palette for, where is it, space ownership, and where we can initiate transfer space ownership to another account. So this is a two-step transfer of an ownership. First, you initiate ownership to another account, and then you need to tell another account that hey, you have option to accept or reject this ownership of this space, and there is such a corresponding extrinsics like accept pending ownership or reject pending ownership. And once accepted, this space IDs by owner are changed. So we remove from old owner the space ID, and then we add to new owner the space ID. Yeah, so this is two important things happening. And from UI perspective, it looks very, very easy. So for example, you can get like this guy account, and for example, you want to transfer ownership of this hello world thing to them. So you need to click on these three dots, and then where is it? Transfer ownership. Click here, paste account, transfer ownership, and then I'm not sure if this guy is looking at this right now. So send introduction, wait a couple seconds, then you see that transfer ownership is in progress, very UX responsive thing. Then you can click here and see that like an guy that currently owns this, you can cancel this, and if that guy from this account goes to this page, he will see this. They will see two buttons like accept, reject. And for example, if a person didn't accept, you can cancel transfer ownership. Let's wait a couple seconds. Okay, so it's canceled, and if you're not sure, you can refresh. Yeah, so you canceled this. So yeah, and for example, another few examples of such similar mappings is that we store vector of replies to a post. So it means like we implement comments like tree structure, and it means that first level of comments is stored like children to the parent post. And for another level of comments, we store in the same way, like comment of first level points to list of children of second level that are children to this post. And similar approaches for spaces to post. So by each space ID, you can see a list of posts that are inside of that space. So this approach is very, very useful and handy. And this allows us to, as I mentioned before, run a whole Subsocial thing inside of Ipfs, and it means that like a social network built on top of Subsocial can be censorship resistant, because the two main components that are required are just Ipfs and Substrate. And with Ipfs, you can have replication. With Substrate, you can distribution of servers of your network. So then, very important thing is from Substrate are events, of course, and we use them a lot. And why they're helpful? Because you can subscribe to events on web app, mobile, backend, and so on, and then do different things based on events. Like you can index information into your Postgres database, Elasticsearch, or even on UI when we create a new post. Let's see, like let's go to one of the spaces. And let's say we want to write something here. And if you write it, we should be able to see something in console. So when you post something, where is confirmation model? Oh, here it is. So when you send transaction, we subscribe to event, and once we receive event, in that event we have ID of new post, because we cannot know ID of new post in advance, because even if we track post IDs as a sequential number, you can see it in a post palette over here, like next post ID. You cannot be sure that the next post ID will be +1, because there could be different other people that are creating posts. So that's why we are subscribing to post created event. And I think it's something another place. Yeah, and on post created extrinsic over here, we are throwing this event post created, and in this post created we put such data like creator and new post ID, and web app subscribes to this event, and if this web app sees that there is event post created with this current user, it takes this post ID of new post and just do this redirect. That's why, yeah, events are really very helpful. And why you need off-chain indexing? Is that because, yeah, we will get to that in another part. Like, do we have some time for Vlad? He wants to talk about JSON RPC and free transactions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Vlad, you can continue from challenges of web app.
I see Vlad's been pretty active answering questions in the question
nice.
box. Thanks, Vlad. Is there any question that you answered that you just want to say a few words to that I can close?
Like the first question that was asked is about where to start from, where to start learning Substrate. So the answer was totally correct, that read code, write your own code, and like chat, repeat. But I would rather add that it's quite useful to look through Substrate seminars, rather technical. For example, like substrate weights is very important thing on the substrate, and starting developing on the start of your developing of substrate pallets or something like that, you will not think on like that questions, but in future you will dive deeper into Substrate and understand that it's like very important things. So that's where the learning Substrate becomes harder, is when you're deep in dive. So the starting point is to like really read code and try to write your own pallets. There was like 4 questions on IPFS, but I think I tried to answer them. Yeah. Okay. On RPCs, should I share slides or?
Yeah, cool. Let's do that.
Okay. Yeah, can you see slides?
Yep, crystal clear.
Firstly, we had a challenge that there's a lot of time you need to start using Subsocial. Like when you like open a link, you have to wait around 4 or 5, 6, maybe depends on your machine, like maybe 10 seconds before the browser connects to a Substrate node, and it was quite annoying. And we were trying to solve this problem, and that's where we came to RPCs, because like Substrate has 2 types of connections, like WebSocket and HTTP. So what's pros of using RPCs, like simple HTTP requests on a web app, like for our front-end development, is that there's no need to wait for Substrate connection, and we can fetch all the data we want just like as soon as we open the page. So it happens with simple post requests that return us. What is the next point? That returns us a JSON file with understandable for JavaScript types, like not like bytes vector, but a simple vector which is understandable by JavaScript. And the Google Lighthouse started to show higher performance score, which is very useful for Subsocial, because then we become to we become higher in a results list on Google search, like that. What is bad things I can talk about in developing, in using like JSON RPCs, is that there's tons of additional Rust code in the Substrate node and runtime. So as I saw, like parity devs don't use a lot of RPCs in the pallets. So there's like a bunch of them, but not that many as we have. So fixes. So, but it depends on a number of RPCs, RPC endpoints. So if we have 1 or 2 RPCs, it's not a big deal. But if we have around 10, 20 RPC endpoints, every gets like post by IDs, gets user feed, which is more complex, or get all posts of all spaces where which user is following. It becomes a lot of copy paste because of specific of writing those RPCs.
Maybe you can show some code just quickly.
Okay, I have my ID here. So like an example of our post palette, but stop, I don't share it. Yeah, can you hear the ID? Can you see?
Yes, we see.
Yeah,
Okay.
cool.
Better increase font.
Yeah, ditto.
Maybe put 20.
Oh,
Too small.
looks good.
Yes.
Okay, here we have our, so the JSON RPC constructs of several mechanisms, if you can say it like that. So it's the runtime API and the RPC itself. So the runtime API is usually NoSTD and is developed like in our runtime, in our palette. So we have, for example, just a simple RPC that fetches our next post ID. Yeah, like get next post ID, which means like we just get our storage value. next post ID. So we write a simple function that gets this ID. Then we should define a runtime API for this. Here, runtime API for this, and it's a like simple header declaration here in decl runtime API's macro. So we do this. It's like a simple, the simplest thing you do in runtime API. Then you should pass it to the you should use it in RPC itself. So here's already std environment where we define our header again, but already in our API trait, which is generic here. So and define a name which will be visible in Polkadot.apps maybe, in RPC methods, etc. So and then where the copy paste starts is here where we have maybe 2, 4, 20 RPCs, and what we do is get API, get block provided here, or default block, current block instead. And then call the function via API, and if there's an error, map it maybe, or not, we map there. Then we have to put those runtime RPCs here in impl runtime APIs. We should implement them in our runtime. What we do here, and we have post runtime API. It's a macro. It's not a not fully solved problem of Substrate. Is that on frame 2, we had declarative macros, which were not every IDE can expand them. Not every error could be correctly shown to us, and etc. So that's not in every point of writing a code. You know that you write Rust code, not Substrate custom code, which looks like Rust. So that's a Substrate code which looks like Rust, but it's okay. We put here our get next post ID implementation of our runtime API, and the final thing you should do is to that all of these steps are described on Substrate dev in Rpcs, and we have a link further in our presentation. But I just want to show you on this simple example that the final step is to get our node and to understand that we have this RPC, and we extend those RPCs that are already here, Substrate Frame RPC, pallet transaction payment RPCs. We extend them with our custom RPCs, here for this example exact, is post API. We write the same copy of but for every custom RPC. So that's how we add them, and the main problem is in a copy paste, but in other things it's okay. Let's go back to our presentation. So as I said earlier, all of what I showed you can read again as Substrate dev. That's where we landed from.
And I'm just going to jump in with, if anyone watching needs help with custom RPCs, you know who to ask, because I'm sure if you look at your source code, you'll find that Subsocial has a lot of custom RPCs like we just went over, and it's always useful, you know, to make new friends when you're trying to do something yourself.
Yeah, true. So the okay, I will say I will talk about all challenges. So the next challenge was that there's no support for SQL in a substrate, or in like using off-chain workers maybe. So we need to do off-chain indexing in some way, and we do this with our off-chain services written in Node.js. So that's what Alex taught about, is like that we have this list of events which we follow on our off-chain services and write customly organized information from what we have on-chain. So which features are hard without off-chain indexing is personalized notifications and full-text search, which we talked about earlier. And we solve them using GraphQL for Substrate. So we use Subsquid. Like, I'm not an expert in this part of development, but what I can say is that it significantly increases performance of our web decentralized application, because we get that content really fast, not like with only RPC, because like, even using RPCs is not that fast as reading from PostgreSQL, for example, using like GraphQL on top of it. Furthermore, it adds an ability to sort and filter the data on our application in any way we want. So we have these most liked, most recommended, and all those filters. Do we? Yes, thanks to GraphQL. The third challenge is what we talked about a few times earlier, is that users do not want to pay tokens for social type of transactions. For example, if I want to start using Subsocial, I just, and I have my extension, I just want to open Subsocial, and like I saw a post and I want to like it immediately. But it's possible, but there are a lot of questions because blockchain should be very secure, and we cannot allow everyone to make free transactions. That's why token exists. And how we solve this is implementing feeless transactions using a few references. We'll show them now. Like it's, I'm not sure, maybe Substrate Seminar, yeah, for sure, with Sean Tabrizi. And that's, in that seminar, he actually develops a simple version of feeless transactions, which will allow just to not to pay fee for a transaction. So the transaction payment palette will not check whether you have enough deposit to pay fee. And let's turn back and say that using feeless transactions, user don't need to pay tokens for like each move, and that's where we can improve our UX, user experience, on our web app. But we still need to be very careful when designing all this stuff, because blockchain could be attacked, especially with denial of service attack, when we, if we will fail in some of our checks, which allows people to make free transactions. So we should develop it and design very carefully. But as soon as it will work, it will be a good improvement. So what's done for now is that first of all, we decide what accounts are allowed to have feeless transaction. Like there are 4 of them, people whose email confirmed, people whose phone number confirmed, and people who, like accounts, which have existential deposit on Polkadot or Kusama. Okay, I can demonstrate it later in a demo if you want, but for now, like the second thing, what we do is we use signed extension. Like on our first step, when like not the first, it's like the third step where the transaction already executing, and we check whether account is permitted or not to make free call. But in that specific transaction, we don't want him to pay fees. So we set later in the code I will show you that we set a base fee to no, and we don't want again people to attack our blockchain, so we should pre-validate that extrinsic. So we use signed extension like to do this, and
maybe just add that signed extensions allows to validate extrinsics, so-called transactions, before adding them into transaction pool, so that they don't spend resources of all nodes on the network. So this is very interesting and important.
That's what I wanted to say, that we use signed extension to pre-validate that extrinsic before it's added to a transaction pool. And the most scary, the worst case we can get is that our just RPC node will be attacked, but we can have a firewall which will like cut off that attack. So and like it will not hit our blockchain because those transactions will not be added to transaction pool. And the third thing what we do, we wrote a pallet that tracks consumed permits of free transaction calls using like a storage. So it will be a lot easier to show an example, but like we have windows which are maximum permits per user per period. So like in what we want to improve, because now anyone can make like 40 transactions per day, but we want to split it and make multiple rate limiting, which is technically possible, like to split them, for example, for 4 windows, like 1 block, 5 minutes, 1 hour, and 1 day, and maybe, who knows, 1 week. So if the 5 minutes rate was consumed, then the user cannot like overflow it using his 1 hour limit, something like that. But first of all, we don't want to like the verification process can be attacked, and we still have tokens on a blockchain which a user can lock. And what we want to do is to determine a number of free transactions per user in a period based on a locked amount of tokens. So maybe those rate limiting windows will be based on how many tokens the user locked. Okay. Like, is there some time to show a demo?
Yeah, let's see the demo. We are running out of time. In a minute, we'd be officially over time, but that's okay. Let's see what we have left over, because I think this is super interesting. We're getting into like a bit more in depth.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what we have here is quite interesting thing because it uses at least 2 or 3 things from Rpcs on Substrate dev. So it's a loose coupling. Yeah, so we have our trust palette where we check whether account has email verified or phone number verified. That's done like with a simple extrinsic, but only specific users can call them. And we define it in a set trust level type in our trade, which extends like ensure origin trade, which means you can pass the your pseudo account or like to call this extrinsic with your with the account type you pass there. So it could be a pseudo account. You can use it. You can call this extrinsics with pseudo proxy, or you can pass there your palette collective, like console, etc. So it can be configured. The next thing is that trust levels are defined as a bit mask. So we can add a limited amount of them, but it's...
Vlad, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm seeing a very blurry screen. I'm not sure if I'm the only one. Maybe can you scroll up and zoom a bit?
Mm-hmm. I can just change. Is it better now?
Yes.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. Cool.
Cool. So here we set trust levels for account, and what we do then, we should check them in our rate limiter. So there's the main extrinsic, which is called try free call, and the first what we're doing here is like check whether the extrinsic is signed, and then check whether the account is trusted. So it's done via trust handler, which is a trait, which is an abstraction over our trust palette. So we have here like 3 functions: is trusted account, is email confirmed, is phone number confirmed, but it's extendable and it will be. So then we implement this trust handler in our trust palette. So we depend here only on our trace palette and implement like what we want from functionality of this palette. So an example of is trusted account. We are checking here whether the account is like, as it's a bit mask, we check whether any of words that the trust levels bit mask is not 0. So there's at least one field bit. Then we can use this in our rate limit, like this exact implementation in our rate limiter via runtime. So all we need is to pass the trust palette, which will be defined in our construct runtime, pass to a trust handler type. So this will mean that we use the implementation of our trust handler in trust palette, and we can use it in our rate limiter. Well, that's a simple like example of loosely coupled pallets. So it's quite a huge font, so I a bit confused. What we do then is checking our like rate configs, which is like, for now it's like 1 day and 40 permits. So we have our windows here. So we check our windows here. So there's we get stats. We check whether our stats is not overflowing like our permits. Like it's a simple algorithmic work with our storages. So what we do is to read storage 1, compare with the information which we get from our constant, and then do stuff. So if you want, like in our signed extension, we check this without updating our storages, but when extrinsic executing itself, so we write to a storage, and what we do is to like read our constant, read our storage, and then if needed, update storages with new stats. The most interesting thing here is a pre-validation process with a signed extension, which means as soon as like we can validate whether our extrinsic will finish successfully before it is actually executed. So what we do here is validate with our, like, first of all, we check whether a call is exactly our try-free call. Then we just ensure that this account is trusted, and then like filter call. Like if there's it's one more thing that we forgot to talk about is that free calls is allowed only for social actions. So we have this call filter here, which we define in our runtime, where only create space, create post, follow account, etc. actions are allowed. So if the wrapped call here is not one of them, then we don't allow to make a free call. Something like that. Okay. So maybe I forgot something, but we already run out of time. So we can share a link to this code to explore it a bit more.
Cool. Yeah. Can you post in a link to that,
Yeah.
Vlad?
Yeah.
Yeah, also, I would like to mention that we are looking for people to join our team. Like we're looking for Substrate Rust developers, for React developers, Flutter, and dev experience. Yeah, so if you are interested, just send direct message to our Twitter account, and yeah, we can continue from that point.
Sweet. Well, super interesting stuff. My question is just this, like, very high level, eager to see this in production question. What's the when are feeless when is the feeless functionality going to be ready to be used? And like also connected to that, like how are you going to be testing that? I know that it's basically a big point of vulnerability in the sense that, like you said, you really need to carefully design and maybe account for situations that you wouldn't otherwise think of when you're just running it in a local node. So I guess, two-part question: when is Philip pallets going to be ready and available, and how are you going to ensure that it meets all the battlefield tests that you need?
Yeah, so usually we start with writing tests. So at least on blockchain, we have lots of tests for all the functionality. And yeah, we're writing these tests, and I think we will add some more, and still ongoing review of these pallets in general. But yeah, right now we're busy with preparing a mainnet node. So first, I think we will try to launch this mainnet, and then maybe after we will get back to feeless transactions, or we will try to test them in parallel, but after releasing mainnet. Yeah, and also there is UI integration required for that, because like feeless transactions without proper UI is not good enough. Because like, for example, it would be very helpful to see number of free transactions left for you per day. Like on top right corner, you can see right now your current account and tokens in your balance. So there we definitely need to add something like you have like 30 out of 40 transactions per today. And that's one thing. And then also we need to modify our onboarding process where people verify emails a little bit, so that we can send accounts that verify the email addresses to this trusted palette, and mark that these accounts are allowed to have some transactions. But here is very interesting philosophical remark that I think in terms of free transactions based on verified email address, a blockchain should behave more like a centralized thing, or like more censoring entity in some way. Because think of it like, if we, what people want, people want to not spend any tokens and use decentralized social media. But what is the closest similar thing that don't ask for tokens is like, let's say, Twitter or Medium. And on Twitter and Medium, you could create account, and at some point, even without verifying the telephone number, but even if you verify telephone number, it's relatively easy to generate email addresses and phone numbers and all this stuff. But still, Twitter gives you access to their services and allows you to send some tweets. I'm not sure about limitations, but I believe that you cannot send like tens of thousands of tweets per day. You will be rate limited or blocked, etc., etc. And people are fine with that, because if they are doing something under normal usage, like several tweets per day and likes and so on, everything is good. But if you try to abuse Twitter, it will block you. So if we trying to get the same user experience as Twitter, then we need to behave like Twitter. This is how I think. And so if you want something for free, then please be aware that if you behave like a spam machine, then you should be blocked or removed from the trust level, or mark that you behave like a botnet or something. But if you want to send tons of transactions and don't want to be considered as a botnet or something, then please pay for these services. So this is how I see it. Either you use it for free, but you can be censored if you behave badly, considering from system level, from point of view of the system, or if you don't want to be censored, then just use it as normal blockchain by paying for transactions.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to remember that the very point in implementing economic incentives is that that's a security approach. So having feeless transactions has its use cases, but it must be incorporated into the architecture very carefully and very well thought out, because it shouldn't be the de facto. But that's super interesting. So I think that's a wrap. Is there any last things you want to leave us with? I know there's someone in the chat asking about some docs for feeless transactions. The best resource is the video that I shared, and in addition, there is a branch of the node template that Sean has done, which is also a great resource to learn more about implementing your feeless transaction palette. I just shared in the chat. Well, thank you guys so much. I think this is a good place to stop. I look forward to keeping an eye out on what you guys are developing, and seeing what you guys are gonna keep innovating with. It's like what's really cool about, I think, what you guys are building is that, like what you started with this presentation, saying that we don't know all of the features that need to be there right from the beginning. It's important to sort of start somewhere and then make it very modular and adaptable to new features as it's rolling out. And I think that's really neat. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone who came.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us. It's a great opportunity to share our knowledge, and because we also watch Substrate seminars and learn some interesting information. So it's a pleasure and honor for us to share our findings on Substrate, what we found and what we achieved. And I really want to double this and encourage everyone to think behind Justify, because with Substrate you can build much more different tools. And I totally believe that with like such tools like Substrate, we can build alternatives to Web 2.0 services that we used to use, like Uber and Airbnb, and like some kind of online classifier and so on. So it's totally possible. There are totally lots of challenges, like extension is not the greatest in this world, and you need to solve issue with tokens, but like designing proper incentives could help in this, and everyone wants mobile applications and so on and so forth. Yeah, but I believe we will get to the point when we can compete with Web 2.0 in terms of user experience, and plus having endless ways to monetize services, because it's built on blockchain.
Definitely agree. I shared a link in the chat for those who are maybe interested in sharing what their experience with building with Substrate is. I mean, like what you just said, Alex, it's a great opportunity to also teach other people in the community what you guys are up to, and you have also learned from other seminars. So I'm really happy to keep the space open to those who want to be sharing their knowledge, because it's very beneficial in general. So yeah, join the chat. It's in the link. And with that being said, I wish everyone a nice end of day or beginning of day wherever you are in the world.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Vlad. Thank you so much, Alex. See you guys later.
Yeah, bye.